You're tuning in to Craigcast, the best in Web3, blockchain, NFT, and cryptocurrency technology. Great reviews, incredible interviews with the leading people in Web3. I'm your host, Craig O. Join me on my live stream as we go across multiple platforms, talking to some of the best people in the space. I've done well over 100 episodes, full-length podcasts gone live on multiple channels. All that to be said, Craigcast helps my community to plot, plan, strategize, and implement their next moves. I describe myself as 25% DJ. The other 75% is really steadfast to make sure that I understand the long-term implications of this space. I want to bring information to you. We might not happen to the same NFT community, but we are all here, and the bigger bet is on crypto overall. How will blockchain affect a world that will be fully tokenized in the next 10 to 15 years? Where will quantum computing be? How will AI, as it's already been a disruptor, how will that impact us over the next 5 to 10 years? So everything that we do on this stream is long-term in mind. I'm your host, Craig O. Let's get to it. Keith D is the co-host of live podcasts, memes, and markets, a former licensed investment broker, advisor at Security Token Group. He brings experience from both traditional finance and digital assets. Keith focuses on financial literacy and is known for breaking down complex macro forces like rates, liquidity, geopolitics, and commodities into clear frameworks that help investors understand Bitcoin and digital assets overall. With the full context of global capital flows, he brings a disciplined, institutionally grounded perspective to crypto and consistently challenges surface-level narratives. GM, Keith, how are you?
What's going on, man? I'm fantastic. Today's the best day of my life. How you doing?
You know, I love that. It's the best day of your life. I'm doing good, man. It's going to be a great conversation with you tonight. And there's so much to break down and unpack. And I've been following your channel, I would say, for the past probably 3 months, reached out to you. And I was like, Keith, I like how you're breaking things down in a way that's actually having me, when I'm done watching your video, going back, having that conversation with GPT. Actually, our conversation led me to my next book that I'm reading, which is The Changing World Order by Ray Dalio. You did an incredible review on James Clear's book, The Atomic Habits. And so it's just an honor to have you on here, have a great conversation with you tonight. And thanks for being here, my friend.
Yeah, man, I'm excited for it. I'm excited. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I mean, you do this full time and, you know, you're just a guy in a park walking with a stick, casually just talking, sharing your insight and your knowledge and the time that you take to learn these things. You cover the traditional markets, the DeFi, the global, macro, micro sentiment. And I do want to talk a little bit about the Clarity Act, which I think if we do get something to pass this year, I think it's going to be highly butchered. Now, of all these topics that you've discussed across all your channels, which one has generated, do you believe, the strongest engagement and feedback from your audience?
The Clarity Act. Yeah.
Tell me more.
Yeah. And it's definitely one of my favorite things too. I mean, because for anyone who's been around the crypto market, I mean, this is something that has been on the docket for years, many years. And so obviously last year we had the Genius Act passed, getting a little bit of more clarity, no pun intended, around stablecoins in particular, and creating real legislation around that, which is the first time that we've really had a larger bill around crypto actually being passed. And now we've got this Clarity Act, which the original version of this has been passed by the House, I believe, a couple years ago, but never fully making it through the Senate. And that was Fit 21 was the name of that bill. And so here we are now, after years and years of markups and trying to get this all together, finally, hopefully, get across the finish line with some sort of an actual legislation to regulate the entire cryptocurrency market, making definitions around who has jurisdiction, what things actually mean as far as what different types of assets and the topology and the taxonomy, rather, of the space. And the last thing I'll say on that is you also have the CFTC and the SEC themselves working together to get the clarity and the regulations in place, even without this legislation. So it's a pivotal moment for what happens next with crypto and digital assets.
You know, 90% of our money is digital right now. And when you think about it, those early payment rails, you know, of PayPal and Venmo and Zelle through your bank, it was nothing more than to kind of show you the ease of use of how money was going to transfer digitally. You know, where does our dollar go this year? And you know, I guess that's really kind of the big thing that I was thinking about into tonight's pod is where are we going into Q2? I mean, here we are at the end of Q1, and maybe I kind of want to talk about this, lightly cover it. And I'm always careful because you tread on geopolitics and you're always very cautious. And maybe I want to kind of nail you down on a couple opinions. And by the way, you can put me on the hot seat as well. I feel like this Epstein list not being released, and we'll say, well, it has nothing to do with crypto. It has a lot of things because it has everything to do with credibility and getting rid of pedophiles, no matter if they're left or right. I don't care. But do you think the Epstein list, I believe it affects our market, and I believe it actually is going to hurt crypto if the president doesn't step up and say something and actually release the names? Do you agree? Do you not agree? What are your thoughts?
So, I haven't spent a ton of time looking into it. I've actually done my best to avoid it for many reasons. I'm one who can certainly, feel the pain of people, and so
Totally.
in that, I've seen a few things and I've heard some opinions that have made me think. And one of the things that I actually saw today that made me think was around how, um, and obviously these conversations are being had. Everyone's talking about this, right? So the thing that I'm taking away from what's happening here is, in my worldview, when I was a young person, I was introduced to a movie called Zeitgeist. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes, I have.
So it's basically like one of the OG conspiracy theory movies. Right?
Okay.
And it talks about 2001. It talks about other events throughout history. And it just kind of, I was 8 years old when I saw that movie. Okay, so I was very young. And it just completely threw off my whole worldview. And I was like, oh, snap. Like maybe a lot of the things that I thought were normal and real are not at all. And in a way, my friends and I, we grew up watching how, we were very aspirational. We wanted to be successful in life, but we looked at Hollywood and we were like, well, there's something a little bit funky about what's going on over there. Like it kind of feels like there's, some very evil things happening around all of that. And so the biggest epiphany that I've had from what's happening right now is I almost feel like at least, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people have kind of been dripped the idea that this is kind of what's been going on for many years, right? And now it's there, but it's actually real, right? So some people are like, for them, this is that moment for them of like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that this is actually the real world.
Treasure Island, my friend. No little boy comes back the same.
And for me, unfortunately, I feel like I've been trained for this moment. So I'm like, this isn't much of a surprise to me.
Right.
But point being, the thing that I saw today that made me think was, okay, what if someone did a whole short, as like a short on Instagram? They were like, what if this was kind of being used as a way to get people to overthrow their governments, right? This is a government toppling kind of a thing. And then you use this as an opportunity to usher in new standards for how mechanisms work in the world.
100%.
So, it doesn't have to be literally a new government, right? But different systems, different means of transparency,
right?
Different forms of money, maybe even could be a part of the conversation that ends up coming out of this. And that's what I'm most curious of, is what comes after this hoopla that we're seeing now.
Ray Dalio's book, we're in stage 5. Stage 6 is revolution and civil war. But the revolution that we think of is sort of the guys with the musket knives, and you have the old pictures of way back when in the 1800s. And now that kind of civil war is being fought on a technology front with AI and the infrastructure there. And that in of itself is powerful. All the tools that we utilize to become better content creators and take in more information. So it's kind of interesting. Thank you for kind of covering the surface of the Epstein effect and what is its kick to, we had this idea of a crypto-friendly president. He was going to rein in digital assets and it's going to make everybody rich and go get. And I think that this is a pause for a moment. Like, forget the money for a minute. Tell me about how good the markets are. I want to know that children aren't being exploited and people are being safe. Forgive me for being virtuous on this one particular topic where it's sort of, if there was a hill that I would speak up on, that would be the one. If we have a platform and a mic, that's for me, not for you.
That's fair.
But all that to be said, later on, maybe we'll talk about what does this do to the credibility of a Clarity Act passing. We saw Brian step back on Coinbase and be like, nah, whatever you're doing. And then he comes with a $3+ million commercial, which my family and I, for the Super Bowl, we were singing, everybody now Backstreet Boys wants to come next year. Good for you guys. I mean, make some money. But all that to be said, like, are we still with the clownery? I mean, you and I are QCCs, quality content creators, not KOLs, key opinion leaders. We are QCCs. When you look at the comments and the views and the overall interaction, what social signals tell you which macro or crypto topics are truly a hot button issue right now? So we talked about the Clarity Act being that is the thing that catches the most lightning rod moments. Tell me a little bit about on the crypto end, because you have memes and markets with Ben. By the way, if you're tuning in, Ben, GM to you, my friend, what is it that you're seeing with alts? And is there anything that you're speculating on right now? Not telling people to go spend their money, but let's talk a little bit. Let's get some alpha from you.
So the fascinating thing about what's happened for me over the past year and a half is I've been listening to a man named Jeff Booth. Are you familiar with Jeff?
I am not.
Okay. He wrote a book. I haven't even read it. I don't even know what it's called. But I know that it is about the nature of markets being deflationary. And he makes a really big argument for why Bitcoin in particular, right, is kind of the only answer to the debt-based system that we have today. And I'm someone who spent, I'd say, since 2017, it's currently almost 9 years in this space. And almost none of my time was really spent focusing fully on Bitcoin in particular. But every day, more and more, that I really, really do my best to stay objective and listen, I do get closer to looking at why Bitcoin is unique in the space that it sits in. And so my worldview on this whole crypto thing is there's two different ways of looking at this. And this is just how I look at it. You've got the Bitcoin, decentralized money, freedom, technology kind of world. And then there's really, this is transparent and distributed, but not necessarily decentralized technology that allows for, quite frankly, total, utter financial surveillance.
Yep.
So with those two diverging worldviews of what this technology is really about, I have realized that I actually want to be more cautious about making sure that I'm exposed to both of those worldviews instead of only the doomer financial surveillance one, which is what I've been subscribed to for the entire time.
Yeah.
So in the things that sit in the middle, I would say technologies that connect all of these types of systems together, the traditional systems to the blockchain systems. For me, my favorite thing that I'm willing to talk about all the time is Chainlink. Okay. I absolutely love the technology and the concept of, hey, I don't need to be a chain. I don't need to be a blockchain. I need to be infrastructure that enables blockchains to do things that it wouldn't be able to do otherwise.
You speak on, something that we were talking about, the narrative of social currency. And when I had on, I had Benjamin Minku on, who's the CEO of Multiverse X, MVX, formerly Elrond. And I believe in their infrastructure, their platform, their user interface, which is a great experience. Because I believe that if you have crypto, you have to put it to work. But the social currency and the mind share, when you speak of Chainlink, and I've also heard you talk about XRP. And so the fudders will say with XRP, well, certain, this is more centralized. And the real DeFi guys will be like, I'm not touching that. And Bitcoin is the people's token. And then I have to wonder, with all the price fluctuations, there has to be sort of a game and, that's being played on a level that we're not aware of. You have to sort of have that inside track, because you and I can do a lot of reading, which we do behind the scenes to make what we do better, so that we come on here and we feel like we know what we're talking about in general. But it kind of relates to me, like, what token is it that we're talking about without being specific that feels very much like a CBDC? And that's, for those that are listening, is a centralized digital backed currency, which has permissions. And you've spoken about this on a number of podcasts, a number of short clips that you've done. Are there times where you're going to say, shoot, do you, when you're looking at different cryptos, are you diversifying your basket just in case you're wrong on one and you were right on the other? Is that sort of kind of your play?
Absolutely. And with the caveat of in particular for me, I'm almost completely staying away from any particular blockchain.
Mm. Yeah.
And I try. There's some blockchains. Once again, Bitcoin is a blockchain, right?
Right.
So, but the idea and the goal is, for me,
Yep.
infrastructure, picks and
Yep.
shovels, right? Even when I look at AI, what do I look at? I don't care about the data center themselves. I care about the raw materials and the energy,
Yep.
right? That's kind of how I just look as an investor. I like to look thematically. Where can I make sure that I don't, no matter if I believe in this future, how can I make sure that I don't get it wrong at all, right? Like, how do I make sure that I fully take advantage of this without having to pick a winner?
Right. Right.
So that's
And
how I try to think about it.
that's important. You know, I was looking at, as you were talking, I was kind of writing down. So I have 4 particular tokens that I continue to invest in. One is a big narrative token that sort of is the digital gold, and we'll say that's Bitcoin. Then I look at another one that has sort of it teeters the line. When I think politics, I'm an independent. I sit on that fence. I don't want to associate. I want to associate with my neighbors and my friends. And it plays in the yard of TradFi and it plays in the yard of DeFi. And so you kind of get the best of both worlds in this particular one. And it's a gaming token. And I've done interviews before, so people can pick up on that. And then I decided that I wanted to pick one meme that had a high level of liquidity, that is known, that represents something that everybody has related to. It's definitely had some controversy in its past, but it connects to some of the other communities, so people will pick up on that. And then the other one is a token that I believe has superior technology, but its social currency and its reputation is something that needs to continue to build up, but by far delivers some of the best stuff out there. So those are my 4 things, and people can look into my channel, kind of figure out what moves, because I feel like when you speak about a token, I remember early on when I used to come on to YouTube to watch guys like Scott Melker and others when they would speak, and I talked to Scott about this on the pod. He'd be like, "Man, people got mad. I said this coin, and then someone went out and dropped tens of thousands of dollars, and then they're mad at me."
That's wild.
You know, in your video, one of your videos, you said, and I love the titles that you put, you really put a lot of thought into this. He says, what they aren't saying about the economy. What do you think is the biggest blind spot for investors that they're missing right now, that they could possibly be taking advantage of in what I kind of consider a quasi bear? If you don't want to call it a bear market, I'll say quasi bear.
Yeah, I will say that I think this first half of the year is probably going to be a little bit more rocky, right, for equities and therefore for any risk.
Right.
And in that, there's always 2 things to separate, right? There's the economy itself, and then there's the markets. Okay. Now, the markets can sometimes look forward to what is happening in the economy, right? It's not that they're completely detached from one another. There are some correlations and things that you'll find. But the thing about the economy right now, and there's 2 major problems. One is that the data, okay, that we're getting in, we can't be super hyper confident about due to massive revisions that we've seen over the past year, and the politicization of a lot of our institutions at the moment. Now, I don't care one way or the other. It's just a reality of what we're seeing, right? So with that, we're looking at data. We're trying to get it from different places. We're seeing, for me, right, I'm starting to look at the trueflation metric a little bit more.
Yep.
Okay. And what is it saying? It's saying that inflation's at like 0.8%, right? So it's saying it's very underreported. And even if we don't just look at the actual number itself, we look at the direction, right, of trueflation and where is it heading. It's been coming down and down and down. And so Anthony Papagliano likes to point out that it kind of looks like and feels like right now, the biggest risk in the economy might be that we're coming into a period of potential deflation, right? And if that happens, then that's going to be an excuse, right? Once again, like, let's say we get some massive revision in the CPI numbers, right, in a month or 2 from now, and all of a sudden, actually, sorry, we're at 0.0% inflation, 0.05% inflation, and we need to cut rates to 0 immediately. Okay, so the thing that I would say that is the risk in where we're at now versus what I think the common consensus is that inflation has come down drastically. The labor market is not performing the way that we've thought it is. And there might be an excuse here to very quickly, very swiftly, get interest rates down a lot lower. Also having a new Fed chair in place to lead that regime change.
Yep.
And from there, then see markets kind of turn around and potentially have this generational run that I personally think would be coming in the next couple of years before the end of this presidency.
It's an interesting thought, and again, I think a lot of the unpredictables I think were expected. I think there are definitely some twists, and again, speaking to the Epstein effect, the Clarity Act, that I think most of us would have been like, oh, it's going to pass. Of course, it's going to pass. This is monopoly. We're going to see everything. America is going to robust again, but I think we have a thing to face. I mean, we printed more money during COVID than I think the history of printing money. I think half as much of the money ever out in circulation. There were two definitions of inflation. The one that was the old definition of inflation, which is the expansion of money supply that's out there, which, again, the metrics of basic supply and demand. And then the thing that I think is taught in a lot of the colleges, and this was actually brought up by Peter Schiff, and I hope I get this part right, Mr. Silver guy. But you're supposed to see prices continuing to go up. Inflation is supposed to happen. Prices are supposed to go. I remember that iced tea can, used to say 99 cents on it. I challenge you to go find an iced tea for 99 cents. Everything has continued to go up. As we head into the end of this Q1, right, and we're looking at April, May, June, and there's a lot of unpredictability. And, if a Clarity Act does pass, I think you and I probably, similar, will say, well, this is going to kind of be a butchered one. It's going to miss a leg. It's going to miss a couple fingers. It's going to look like something. And then you're going to have someone sitting, again, it's not bashing. Again, I'm very independent, but you're going to have that, that person be like, oh, I told you it's beautiful. Look at this bill. It's gorgeous. It's like the salesman of nothing in a sense right now. And I feel like everybody's waiting for something with substance. So when we look at this overall market and we're heading into Q2, and I think you kind of already answered that question, is that it's sort of this chop. And I was watching a guy today talking about Bitcoin. He does such a credible job. And he talked about the 50-week moving average, 2 weeks, 2 times in a row. When it hits that, you find yourself in a bear market. And then the next metric is that 200-week moving average. Mm-hmm. And his thought at the end, or his thesis, I love that word in this space, is that we're going to see a high $30,000 Bitcoin. I made my predictions video, and I said, we're going to see Bitcoin between 50 and 70,000. So Craig, you don't read charts. No, but you listen to enough people talking in the room. And if you have 100 people in the room and you start listening closely on those conversations, you're going to have a fairly good idea of where people are positioning and where they're hearing the overall market. And a handful of those are going to be good at reading charts. Tell me a little bit about memes and markets. I want to know a little bit more about your show that you do with Ben Levitt. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. That right there is my absolute, my baby. I'm very, very excited about the show. So we go live every Tuesday and Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. And the goal of the show is to take the mainstream conversations that are being had in the world. So the memes, everyone in the crypto space assumes that memes means meme coins. But the memes is not about that. It's about memetics. It's about culture. It's about what's actually happening in the pulse of the internet in general. And where does that intersect with what's happening in markets? I point to the most obvious moment, if we had been around at the time, would have been what happened with GameStop, right? Back in 2021, where you had a bunch of people on Reddit that essentially forced a short squeeze on a bunch of hedge funds. And that's the perfect example of how there's a reflexivity in how markets operate, where if you have things that are happening in culture that lead to actions that then happen in the markets, and then these things feed back into one another and create these astronomical impacts in the world. So that's kind of the thing that we're studying, is where culture and financial markets intersect on that show. And we've been having on some cool guests and just really trying to push the envelope on what are the conversations around crypto that can bring the people who don't know anything about crypto, or who might not even care that much about finance, and get them in the door and to feel a little bit more comfortable and feel like, okay, there's a safe space to talk about this where I don't have to feel dumb, or I don't have to feel like I don't belong. So that's kind of the goal.
I love that. I was talking to a financial advisor today who manages quite a bit of money, and She said, I have a portion of my portfolio invested in Bitcoin ETFs. And I thought that was really fascinating because this individual, as well astute as they are in the traditional world, wouldn't touch crypto with a 10-foot pole. And even if they did, they would actually tell me quietly. They'd whisper and say, Greg, I got a little bit of that frog that you talked about. And I love how you say, about your show, Memes and Markets, because it is about community. Overall, where are things going? How do we open the conversation? How do we make this nuanced space? Because the idea of self-sovereignty is very scary to people, right? Your custody, your care, and your control. And I think a lot of people, they find that getting away from them. I do want to talk about the relationship between precious metals, gold and silver, to that of Bitcoin, because we're seeing an adverse. We're not seeing Bitcoin keeping up with gold. And gold is still holding. I mean, everyone's like, it dropped, it's down, still over, I think 5,000, or it's touching in that line. And it went up as high as I think 5,600. It was silver that the rug got pulled out from underneath. And I don't think a lot of people expected that, right? Because when something's going up, your natural feeling is that, oh, it's just going to go up forever and ever. And then you keep following, chasing that up. And by the time you're already putting money into that narrative, whatever that said narrative is, you're already behind the pace. So what do you make as to the relationship of our beautiful digital asset of Bitcoin and to that of gold and silver? How do you see those following in line with one another?
So I've heard a pretty, I think it's Jordy Visser is one of the people that's popularizing this saying at the moment. And it's this idea of shorting abundance and longing scarcity. And so the point of the line is thinking about the world of bits, right? The world of anything digital, and comparing that to the physical assets. So right now, the problem here is that for anyone who wants to get involved in the precious metals market, yeah, you're looking at an extremely extended market, period, right? So anybody who's thinking, oh, gold and silver and copper are the answer to what's happening in the world right now, this is where I should put my money, right? As, by the way, crypto is down, 30, 40, 50%, whatever it is.
Right.
The problem with that is that obviously the timing, okay, is not the best timing to sell your Bitcoin and buy gold, right? You're going to get whipsawed. Very, no financial advice being given here. I'm just saying that's the risk profile.
Chances are.
So, but when you zoom out a little bit and we think about the fact that Bitcoin has been gold potentially is in a secular move. So in markets and investing in macroeconomics, investing, Ralph Powell and other people have always thought about the three different time frames that you're existing on. You have the tactical being the very short term, days to weeks at a time. You've got the cyclical, okay, which you can zoom out to looking at, 6 to 24 months, right? Thinking anywhere in that kind of a range, 2 years, 6 months, whatever, things like that. And then you're looking at more secular trends where you're talking about 3, 5 years, decades at a time. And I personally think about what's happening with gold. I'll just stop with gold as potentially a part of a secular trend that we're looking at, where we are seeing de-dollarization around the world. We are seeing the need also for precious metals inside of what the actual data center build outs that are happening in this AI move. So this is kind of the thing that I'm starting to keep more of an eye on. Now, was I talking about that 6 months ago? Honestly, no, I was not.
Right.
So I'll be very clear about that. But I do see how we are seeing, right, at the end of the day, a reason to start paying a little bit more attention to what's happening with gold. And the thing that I like about commodities is that in the same thing for Bitcoin, it works in the same way where we think, oh, well, Bitcoin's at $5,000, back in 2017. And there's no way that it can go from $400 to $5,000. And that's not the end of the move, right? But when you're talking about things that do have limited quantities to some degree, or at least a disinflationary schedule like Bitcoin, or with mining, you've got a dynamic that does have constraints on the physical supply of something that needs to be used physically. You can have long-term secular runs in the prices of these assets that goes parabolic over time. Right. So that's kind of the thing that I look at when it comes to, I'll leave it at gold, because silver is a lot more complex and it doesn't have the double as strong of a double use as you have an industrial use case and a monetary use case in the same exact way. It's not the same. So
yeah, I think we're going to see a silver breakout at some point. I know some crazy silver heads that at least believe that. But I think is at the same time, I don't think it's like the time for you to go out and to buy it. I think it's, look at your overall financial picture and then kind of figure out what you're comfortable with. And as we would say, like, consult with your doctor, consult with your financial advisor, consult with the person that has the license, that's active there, that's operating on your best interests, that maybe has the fiduciary license, if I'm correct. When I think about Bitcoin, does Bitcoin have to behave in a bullish manner for us to see an altcoin season? How do you see Bitcoin having to behave for other altcoins, other ecosystems to really thrive? Because it's sort of, everybody says, oh, the money spouts out from Bitcoin. People sell their Bitcoin and then the altcoins, it goes to the altcoins and then the altcoins rise. Is that the story? Is that still the narrative? Because I remember the narrative I was told with NFTs is when NFTs are down, crypto's up. When crypto's down, NFTs are, and that was not true. I mean, everybody tried to play this asset class with the market. They were all digital assets. But how do you see Bitcoin correlating with other coins? We call them alternative coins next to that of Bitcoin.
Yeah. And I can quickly touch on the chat here. It says, will commodities like gold and silver outperform crypto this year? I personally would put if I had to bet on it, I would bet on that being the case. I'm expecting a pretty bearish, mild year for crypto.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah.
And I'll be very happy if I'm wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
But dang, I did forget the actual question though, which was altcoins. Okay.
Yeah. What does the relationship have to be there?
Unfortunately, the data tells us that that's exactly how it goes.
I know.
And even this time around, right? Like, a lot of altcoins didn't even see all-time highs, right? And that's devastating.
It's called the blow off top, right?
Yeah.
At the 126 mark.
Yeah.
And shortly thereafter, it had a hold at about 103, I think.
Man.
Went below that.
So honestly, there's nothing else I can really say. It's like,
but I think there's higher lows, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this terminology. Again, I just want to be respectful to it. The higher lows. So last time we saw the cycle retrace, I believe on Coinbase, last time we saw into that market, it was $3,000 or $4,000 Bitcoin. And it came again, and that went from 69,000 down to $3,000 or $4,000 on Coinbase. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then this time, if it retraces, we're going to see higher lows where we're going to see around 30,000 all the way from the feet of 126,000. So the question is, do you have the patience? Do you have the capital on the side? And will you be able to ready, willing, and able to execute when you still think it's going down? That's really the question. I'm curious to see what that dynamic looks like.
Right. And I think it was 3,000 in the 2020 time, right? It was 2020 coming off the 21,000 peak of 2017. It came down to 3K. And then I think this time around it was like 15,000, or this past cycle, the lows around like 15, 17.
Right after 69,000. Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then so, right now I think, gosh, I kind of lost what you actually said again.
So I think we were saying where the higher low, right? So so say the next cycle, we're going to see it at 60,000 when it has a retrace, or 80,000. And every time that we hit this quote unquote bear market and, get rid of it, sell it, it's going, to zero. It's still here.
Yes. And this is what I love right now is there's so many people that are so confident right now about how Bitcoin is done. This is the end of it. It's over. And first off, they're a little bit early, like wait for it to come down a little bit further before you start going crazy. But you see this every single time. And so for the new people, this is one of the roughest periods because you think that you've been duped. You're like, I can't believe it. This is, the end of this new worldview that I have just acquired. And I must have been duped. I must have lost my mind. And for us who have been here before, we still probably feel a little bit of that. I still feel a little bit of it myself. I'm like, maybe I am crazy. But I do know empirically that this happens over and over and over again. Yeah. Right. So yeah, the new lows. I was trying to find a tweet here that, someone was saying that this bear might also be faster. And this is something that I've been talking about in conversations. It's like, well, we have kind of come back because we didn't go up as high. We didn't have a
Right.
crazy parabolic run. It doesn't take that much of a retracement for the end of the bear run to be the lows to be in. I'm not saying they're in now, but I'm just saying we might not see a 3-year bear market again. You know what I'm saying? In that same way, just because the market's just going to potentially get tighter and tighter and tighter.
For you and I as quality content creators, the one thing that we'll never do is take, I've watched, I would say probably between 50 plus of your videos. That I can confidently say. And I've never seen you do a scare tactic. You raise the question, which piques someone's curiosity that, hey, go read a book, go dive in further, go debate this with yourself, maybe with GPT, go call a friend, see what they're doing. And then after, come back and add a comment to my page, because I want to know your thoughts. I genuinely do. And I always feel like that's where you leave people. For me, I just want to have really engaging interviews. I want to dive down, peel back that onion. I love the idea of the optimism of a shorter bear market and it being choppy right now. And the reason that I brought it up is that this idea that when Trump had come into presidency, when it got, obviously when he won, there was this market, this pico rise, and people were exciting. And then I think where I knew there was a problem relation to crypto, and this is not beating on a politician. Again, I really stay neutral. It's almost like we have to say that, that I find that when he launched his meme coin and I watched how many people got decimated, but it wasn't even that, Keith. For me, it was the number of phone calls that I got from family and friends saying, Craig, how do I get in? How do I get in? I want to make money. I don't like someone like, that's my guy. And then some people, I hate him, but I want to make money. How do I make money? I was like, stop. It's like, first off, ask me if I'm getting in. And the answer was no. Mm-hmm. But what was really interesting is how it siphoned off the Ethereum over to Solana to then do that, to then open, maybe you could talk a little bit about WorldFi Liberty, to then bring back over to Ethereum, then to buy Bitcoin. I mean, it was a brain game strategy that was worked well before he came into office. Like, if you win, this is the plan on how to enrich yourself and those around you. And so for me, I was kind of like, step back and I'm like, wait a minute. Okay. This is not about politics of virtue, but I said, well, this is about money. And so if you're going to invest somewhere, understand from top down how people are receiving that information and then how they're reacting to it. What was your thoughts when you saw the launch of the Trump token? Were you thinking this is good for the market or this is trouble? Because CoffeeZilla did a piece on it. Of course, he does pieces like when stuff goes awry. And he said that if you hadn't invested in the first 2 hours, you were at a negative. Mm-hmm. I watched the video. I read through a lot of the stuff. That to me was really interesting. But I think the WorldFi Liberty part and the moving of the crypto and how that was played was a masterclass. It was a masterclass chess move for those that want to say someone's not good at business. I might challenge that notion because it got shown and displayed right in front of us in real time. What was your response after everything crumbled and crashed? What were your thoughts? Were you buying Trump token?
Well, in the moment, it was wild, right? I remember seeing it on Twitter, I guess, and then I'm going to the page. I'm like, okay, let's see if this is really a post there. And I see that's an interesting question there, Samuel, as well, because it's what happened immediately afterward, right, was what the SEC did is they basically excused the behavior and they made it to where meme coins were acceptable. Like they said, oh, these aren't securities anymore. They did that right about a month after, right, that whole thing went down. Yep. So, we talk about this on memes and markets sometimes where it's like there's a thin line, right? And it always comes down to who's writing the legislation, who's setting the rules, right? But to the day of, I'm like, no way, like what's going on? And you see it on his account and it's like, this must be a scam, right? Like there's no way this is real. Only people who knew really for sure were the people that were there, right, at the ball or whatever the heck was going on. And so at that point, right, you see all of the flows into the Solana ecosystem, right? I mean, we already had a nice amount of meme coin stuff happening on Solana before that, about a year, I guess, prior. And then now, okay, this is like the peak moment of all of the liquidity in the system. Honestly, that was the peak moment of liquidity as far as the altcoins and meme coins and all of that. And he, as you mentioned, siphoned all of it right over into his little Trump coin. Raised whatever, like billions of dollars or whatever they came out of it with. And so, and then you see it dissipate, you see it go away. I mean, Melania token right afterward, it was an incredible thing to see happen. And yes, I mean, I saw, like parents, right? Like, how do I participate in this? Not knowing a darn thing. They're like, how do I set up a Phantom wallet? I'm like, you don't even know what you're talking about, right? So, anyways, I think that was, it was the peak liquidity in the market at that time, and he kind of captured it perfectly. And then, after that, you see, first off, the taint that puts on the space is horrific, right? That's terrible, terrible branding, terrible marketing. Everyone's like, oh, this thing is a whole scam. We knew it the whole time. I knew it. I told you. But that's a whole separate game that's going on. I mean, it really, even for me, I was like, oh, the president of the United States, to be, technically, he wasn't yet, is doing that. Like, that really makes this look like a massive joke.
Right.
Right. That was my take.
And it's okay to have critique in that regard. I always find it funny. Before we came on, I was just chatting with Sam about the ideas of free speech. And I said, it's free. There's a cost that comes with it. So, we have to watch our words as they cut through like razor blades. And, visiting back on that moment, and I think about where's our cycle headed. It reminds me to a lot of the X spaces, and I have a lot of fun listening in on those now. I used to participate in a lot of them, and I have a lot of respect for the guys that do it consistently. But a lot of the community building on X and building their brand, I think, is really important, at least showing up, retweeting, adding a comment if there's something that's said that really resonates. But the NFT mania, I don't know. Were you ever a part of the NFT mania?
I was on the wrong end of a pack. NFT. Do you remember Pac? He wasn't maybe that massive, but he had these things. He had a couple of projects. One was called Merge, and it was like these dots that you would buy, and you could like merge them with other ones, and you'd buy multiple dots. And I bought the very top of that thanks to a good friend of mine. Shout out to my guy Mar. And then so no, I really wasn't deep in the game because I held off. I capitulated. I was like, I'm not touching this thing. And then right at the top, I was like, all right, I'll put a couple $100 into this thing.
Right. And by the way, a huge shout out to the Bored Ape Yacht community. I mean, you look at those NFTs, and I think that's the thing, is that I think those right now are maybe around 25,000 last time I looked.
Did you get into the game?
I got into the game, but I would say at a certain point, I felt I got very lucky and then very unlucky at the same time, and didn't have the right security protocols in place. So I got handed a very big lesson, a very humbling moment for me to learn about security protocol, the real difference between cold and hot wallets. I always knew it. I was a content creator, but I was really mostly into the interviewing slide of things. I wasn't really on to the, I'm going to go swing from one token to the next. I think what made me really nervous was the security infrastructure of Ethereum. And just you click on the wrong link once. And, every year you have a lot more that you can do inside a wallet, even on Ethereum, like on Coinbase wallet. You can stay right within the app, and you're minimizing your risk on a hot wallet exponentially, other than if you have a root attack on your phone. So luckily I have your tech department. They really create, make sure that I have safety walls around at all times to protect myself from myself. So metaphorically, I had the gun, I took it out and shot myself in the foot. And in the morning, on Halloween morning last year, where actually it was the year before, it wasn't. Yeah. I just watched all my NFTs just flying out of my wallet. October of 24. And it was just the worst thing. And I had collected all these things, and some of them had massive value and some of them didn't. But I felt like the value was in the community, and that we're going to grow value together. And that's what really attracted me to NFTs, non-fungible tokens. They cannot be fractionalized. Isn't that a good one? When I look at some of your other videos, I love this title. Banks are coming for everything you own. And that is a powerful statement. Do you remember the video? Do you remember that video in which you created?
They almost come out daily, but I do remember that one in the spirit of it around the tokenization of everything. Yeah.
So I almost have to wonder if at some point, right, we see that the disparity between the haves and the have-nots, that line is pushing further, which is why we're in stage 5, this infighting, political unrest, all these things going on, this madness, and you're just trying to keep calm and walk this solid line and, have a good spirit about you so that you can make good decisions for yourself and your family, for your future. On the other side of that, I have to wonder, is our value going to be derived down to privacy? If you give up this privacy, we're going to give you access to this. Remember, it was just as simple as years ago. Give us your email address. Or you go into a store, hey, fill this out and we'll give you 15% off today and you can have this credit card. When you think about that and the advancement of AI and blockchain infrastructure in a world of no privacy, banks are coming for everything you own. I want you to maybe just dive in a little bit just on that title in and of itself, and maybe kind of paint this dystopian world that title shouted to me.
Yeah. I will say, so the way that I've kind of, like I said, when I started talking a little bit earlier, when I came into the space, I really immediately saw this as a grab for power. I saw it as a push to get people to really be comfortable with moving their wealth into a digital format.
Mm.
And when you start, I mean, even back then, you were hearing the rumblings of the concept of a central bank digital currency. And you fast forward a few years and you move and you see the Bank for International Settlements and the work that they're doing around central bank digital currencies, and even a concept called the Finternet.
Yep.
Where essentially there's this concept of imagining having all assets tokenized to some degree and existing within one global unified ledger is the terminology that they use, a unified ledger. And that just kind of woke me up to this idea of, oh, okay, that might be the direction that the world is moving into a world where all assets is just in one place. And not only that, but when you look at the concept of a CBDC or even any smart contract platform type of a deal, you can build programmability into these systems that make it to where you have if-then logic, right? And we also see now, right? I guess I won't name the company, but you've got incredible founders in the world like Peter Thiel, a guy named Joe Lonsdale, who started one of the largest companies in the data space, especially in defense technologies.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you look at that and you look at having the ability to potentially create if-then statements around a unified global ledger for everyone's money, we're definitely moving closer to a world where you writing a specific thing on social media and hitting the post button might lead to an immediate action that can then be taken on some sort of a digital transaction or wallet or whatever that you have access to as well, right? So, we saw an interesting scenario in Canada with the truckers and kind of how things like that can play out from just a government to their own citizens.
Right.
And then you will eventually potentially have to think about that power actually being shifted not to the government, but actually to a bank, okay, or a stablecoin issuer, or any other financial intermediary in that process of in between the governing body and the citizens, right? Then potentially having the power to, at the very minimum, have the ability to cut you on and off from the financial system. So that's the thing that the central bank digital currency kind of enables. And it's not that it has to be that way. It doesn't have to be this dark, scary future where everything is just, this dark, gloomy thing where everyone's controlled and there's no privacy. But the technology that's there will enable that. And it's up to us to pay attention to this technology to actually understand what are the options to preserve privacy, okay, and help to construct the things that we want to see for ourselves.
Right.
And at least there's some agency that we can take towards moving ourselves in that direction. So that's how I see it.
No, I love it. It's it becomes layered when your money is controlled. I remember the time where you would be able to hand someone $1, and $1 just represents a note. It's sort of like an IOU, right? It's an NFT of itself. You hand this paper item and someone places value on it. And now I guess we're left in this kind of world is what is the value? And then behavior, politics, health, that CBDC is going to follow us into a lot of areas. And the question is what are we to do with this information? And I love how you just broke that down and explained it, because after my pods, I always go back and I'll listen. I'll say, what was it that hits me different after. I'm sure you go back and you review your content. It's so important.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll just, as I'm folding my laundry, I'll be like, oh my God, that was a brilliant point. Cause you dropped a lot of insight here that I think is really important. I think one of the things that you talked about was, obviously the labor market, something we need to talk about, trueflation, the Finternet, right? The financial internet of things. People don't understand how this new internet is going to play out. And I always make sure that during the pod, I'm kind of like letting you know, as my guest, that it's always important. I know you do the same thing on Memes and Markets, is you're hearing your guest. You're really taking that moment to step back and go, what is it that's resonating with me that my guest is saying? Giving your background across traditional and digital markets, considering how we've seen manipulation narratives around assets like silver and other markets, how should, in your opinion, not saying that it is, how should individuals position themselves for possible, and I say possible long-term success, and let's just say over the next 5 years, and we talked about it earlier, diversification. Elaborate on that a little bit for us,
Yeah. So one thing that I think a lot of people get wrong about diversification is they think that it means, for instance, in the stock market, having 100 different stocks. Um, uh, there's a book called A Random Walk Down Wall Street. I'm looking because it's right there. And in that book, it talks about how there's been extensive studies done that say even in the stock market, anything around like past 50 different stocks, you're not really diversifying any further. You're not helping yourself any further or creating any less risk for yourself.
Right.
So that's just as an example, but really even further, when you have assets that move in the same way, right? In different types of scenarios, then you're also not really diversified. So we think about diversification in terms of like either the assets within an asset class, or we think only by the asset class. So, oh, this is precious metals and this is digital currency and this is private credit. But if these assets move in the same direction under certain scenarios, then you're still not diversified by the actual theme of what is going on in the world, for instance, in an inflationary environment.
Right.
So in an inflationary environment, right, the bond yields are going to rise and the price of the bonds are going to go down. If you find that in that same inflationary environment that what's an asset? Your private credit, your hedge funds are also going down in value. Well, then those two things aren't actually separate. You're dealing with the same scenario, and it doesn't matter that it's a different asset class. You're getting the same effect on the theme of what's happening in the economy. So that's another thing that I think is worth considering when thinking about diversification.
I want you to tell me what's similar and different about these two, XRP, and as we mentioned before, Chainlink, because you've done quite a bit of content around XRP, and I've heard the FUD and the negative. And I'm just going to take that, and I'm XRP community. I'm just going to throw that shit to the side, and I'm going to let Keith tell me why XRP is definitely a token that I need to pay attention to, and then let's talk a little bit about Chainlink.
So, once again, my thesis on everything, it's changed a lot since I've been in the game. When I saw Ripple and what they were doing in 2017, I was like, oh, this might be the thing that's actually kind of going on here.
Yep.
As time has evolved, you see a little bit more of the potential incentive structures and how it might not be fully aligned. And the only way for what they're doing or trying to do to really work out is for there potentially to be some sort of like deeper plan that the common person isn't aware of. And the thing that I don't like is that kind of has become the mainstream way of looking at this asset, is that there must be some deeper plan for it.
Yep.
And that to me, it scares me off. It makes me feel like I'm, even though I was there before, that was all the way like the thing, before that was on TikTok. Right now, I'm like, oh, well, if everyone's thinking this, then there's probably not as much alpha here as I think. Right.
Yep.
Just in that idea of if that were the case, then if everyone knows, then it's not really that much alpha. But the idea is also extremely ambitious. Okay. Trying to eliminate Nostro Vostro accounts, $26 trillion or so in capital that's tied up in markets. If you get banks internationally to agree that this is a way of reducing the friction in the entire global financial system, then you would have an okay to do it. And the thing is that Ripple has only, right, for the past 10 years, essentially most of their customers are international banks.
Right.
Because a lot of this wasn't legal here, or they had to deal with gray area here.
Right.
So once again, this kind of comes back to something that Simon Dixon talks about a lot. I love listening to him. He breaks down these three different sort of factions in the world. He breaks down the financial industrial complex, the military industrial complex, and the technological industrial complex. And he basically says that these are the three different forces that are essentially coming through to inflict their power over the world, and that they're battling with one another for more power, essentially. It's kind of his whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think about the financial industrial complex and the power that they're potentially losing to technological forces, such as a thing like Bitcoin, it would make sense to me to be able to think of, okay, well, what would be their response to something like that? And quite honestly, if we look at what Ripple has done, the potential networks that they've built out, it wouldn't be a surprise to me that that would be a part of the plan as a way to actually essentially combat the force of something that's a free market instrument like a Bitcoin.
Right.
And to be clear, the way that I think of that is that you've got the central banks with access to unlimited money. If you get to some sort of a scenario somehow, all right, once again, the thing that I don't like is that it takes so many things that just have to happen for this to actually work out, right? So many things that aren't necessarily even legal or clearly done. But if I have access to the money printer, then I technically have full say over what assets do the best. And we've already seen that with the stock market, right? The central bank supporting the bond markets, supporting then the stock markets and allowing people to put risk on there. But if the default asset becomes something that's not the stock market to put risk on in, and it becomes something like Bitcoin or by de facto something like Ripple and XRP, then when the banks want to put on risk because they have access to unlimited capital from the central banking system, then they can move it into that direction. And if I have access to the money printer, then I have access to unlimited power that I can essentially push down on this asset that I own, which is this XRP thing.
Okay.
So.
No, I love that. I love the explanation, but I also like at the very beginning, you kind of gave me, when I say the FUD side of it, which is, look, I don't want to be sheep to the slaughterhouse. If everybody's rah, 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 you're like, whoa, remember I said, it's if we're already hearing about it, by the time we're already hearing about it and people are excited and you're seeing all this short clip content. And look, I wanted to make sure if I stay in line with being a QCC that I'm talking about things that I agree with. So I'm going to throw something to you on the backside. And then I want to hear a little bit about Chainlink. Give me a little bit of sort of your challenge. Again, XRP is very centralized in the sense of its conversation to the broader market, similar to that of Bitcoin. Let's be clear on that. It's, old technology, but a valued one, that being Bitcoin, and much respect to it. I get it. For me, I find that Multiverse X, EGLD, that token and the ecosystem is absolutely phenomenal from a user standpoint, experience, for the ability to actually stake my crypto, earn yield on my crypto, be a liquidity provider. There's so many valuable components there. And it's a token that's been completely beaten down. But their technology, their collaborations, they're set up for Google. They're going to be a payment rail. They're out of Europe. I like the idea. They're actually out of Romania. I like the idea that it's not American in that regard. So it allows a new audience to potentially connect. But a lot of people got beat because at a certain point, that token was as high as over $500 at one point. It's now hovering between $4 and $5. So the question is if you have enough experience and you believe in something, and you believe in what's going on and what they're doing in their protocol, and they have this thing that they launched that they're launching out called Supernova, which is sub-second finality, 600 I think sub-seconds, of where it's faster than you can snap a finger of transaction completion, and really solving that trilemma is really important to me. That's one thing that I'm really excited about, and that's one of the four. So again, if people want to dive in further on my page, kind of see what I'm talking about or what I'm into, go check it out. But again, do your own due diligence, talk to your financial advisor. You and I always recommend that. So talk to me about Chainlink. I want you to give me something that you're challenged, because what I heard from you on XRP is I don't want to be sheep off to the slaughter, but I also like what they're doing with Nostrovostral accounts and how they could manage the world's money could be coming in through this and could create an amazing token value. But again, players are going to be exiting. Scott Melker said it perfectly. He was so surprised how many people, their ability to sell Bitcoin at that price because they had purchased Bitcoin at fractions of a penny. And he was absolutely flabbergasted by that. And I remember him saying that. He said it on my show. He said it before. So let's talk about Chainlink. Give me the FUD, and then give me something positive to back that up if we can.
Yes, and I want to touch on something you said too, because like when it comes to trying to choose a chain, for instance, I think of it in three major buckets or ways to look at that, right? There's the like the free market answer, which is, or like the sovereign money answer is really what I'm trying to say, which is Bitcoin, right? Objectively, there's no other thing that would fit in that category in the eyes of a Bitcoin maximalist. The second thing would be, what do the people actually want to use, right? And I think that comes down to who's done the best marketing to the end user, right? And that also needs to come with some level of technological advancement. Like something about the chain needs to be scalable, it needs to be fast, it needs to be reliable, right? So it could be eGold, it could be Solana. A lot of people love Solana, right? Like that's kind of like the retail user kind of a chain. And then you could also look at the third bucket as like the institutional chain, which blockchain is able to to market to institutions, as well as actually get an institution to adopt the technology there as well. And then you get to things like Chainlink, which to me, in my eyes, are outside of just how do I choose a blockchain, and really just the infrastructure itself of how do these systems come together. So when it comes to Chainlink, the bear case, the FUD, it's much harder for me to FUD on Chainlink because there are few people that are taking the same approach to solving the problem of data interoperability. So there are other Oracle solutions. Okay, there are different ways to get information from a traditional system into a blockchain in a secure format, right? That's for sure. But the CCIP, the cross-chain interoperability protocol as well, right? How do we not only get the data from an outside source into the blockchain space, how do we also get information from one blockchain to another blockchain? And how do we communicate some of the logic around that as well, as far as the programmability of each chain, and make sure that we can communicate across them what each smart contract is capable of, and being able to transport that information back and forth as well. I think that Chainlink has taken a unique approach to it, and I think that they're probably one of the more secure options for it. And it's really hard for me to find a FUD. Besides the idea, once again, that there are other people who are technically solving the problem of data interoperability. But when you look at also the partnerships, the Swift, right, working with Chainlink, when you think about the DTCC, the Depository Trust Clearing Corporation, publicly working with Chainlink, I think it kind of gets to a point where it's like, okay, well, I already saw this as fundamental infrastructure for however you would get traditional banks to come into this space. And now you're telling me that they sit at the actual centerpiece of that, being the DTCC itself. Well, I think that we might be moving in the right direction, right? Now, the real question here, though, is twofold. You've got the technology itself of Chainlink, but then you've got the token, and whether or not the token will accrue value from the utilization of the technology.
Love it.
Which is really important.
Yeah. That's why I think it's again, for with EGLD, I put my crypto to work now. Whereas I don't just hold on it, hope number goes up, contribute to the ecosystem, get in on those protocols, because there's so many protocols built into each system. But there's one thing that I was thinking about, as you just mentioned, the DTCC. You know, before, again, I said, you've been a little bit of my teacher. I'll watch your YouTube videos every morning. They're very digestible. You and I had an offline call, and I said, hey, can I just give you feedback as a fan of great content and someone who's, you know, taking in this information? And when you broke it down for me, is the DTC is that is the settlement layer. And that happened because in the late 60s, all the paperwork that was coming in, it was collapsing on itself. So it was sort of like the early formation of blockchain in a way that could aggregate the most amount of data, keep it accurate and timely to keep our markets moving. Would that be a correct statement?
I think it's fair to look at it that way, and that you need a clearing mechanism. You need a centralized repository.
All right. Is there a DTC's token? Right?
Well,
be interesting.
I mean, when they announced just a few months ago that they were going to actually start to go ahead and tokenize securities transactions, they did mention that they will be doing some of these transactions on the Canton network.
That's right. That's right. And I actually watched that video and I was like, interesting. I don't know if I was able to, because I looked on CoinMarketCap. I think I might have been able to find that token, but then I asked myself the question that you just answered.
Mm.
Does the token in which you invest in with a blockchain or a protocol that does exceptionally well, does that positively affect this token price? And everybody always automatically connects those two narratives. And
Right.
that's not necessarily the case. Hence why you want to have your crypto working and you want to invest in something that's long-term. And it brings me to this next point. AI has been I believe it's been a friend, but it also could chase you further down the rabbit hole in many directions. As I'm reading this book as a perfect example, I'll go back and I'll challenge thoughts or ideas around this book or things that I felt that it didn't mention. When we look at the narrative of AI, right, the information that we're getting, I remember the other day, my wife was looking for a coffee shop and she said, man, I might as well go to Google. ChatGPT is not giving me, it's giving me a place that's just being built. And I said, this is a tool. This isn't the next thing for you to lean on so heavily. I mean, they put these phones in our hand. They call them smartphones. The reason they called them smartphones is because they assumed we're stupid. Don't make them right. Call this an advantage phone, the phone that actually is your partner, but you should be smart enough to challenge your own thoughts and step out. And I love how AI will help me with script ideas. But if it gives me an answer to something, I don't go, well, that is the answer. When you look at how you're working with AI as a content creator and your learning journey, are there some things tips wise for our community that you're taking from your experience 2-3 years in, like myself?
It's a good question, man. I think the biggest thing that I started doing last year that I was very happy about is talking to it, uh, like using the speech feature.
Yep.
Saves a ton of time
Yep.
and also allows you to very naturally flow, right? So I love that. And then there's like Whisper Flow, which is an app. It's a desktop app, right? Or you need to put it on your computer. So I know a lot of people aren't comfortable with that, but that allows me to take that feature to anywhere. Technically, like I can use that to search in Google as well, to just speak to it a lot more smoothly, as well as to Grok is the biggest thing as well. The thing that I like about Grok is that, well, it is X, right? It is Twitter. So you've got the native, like actual cultural pulse on what's happening there. So I love that because you can't get that from ChatGPT. ChatGPT doesn't know what people are talking about. Perplexity doesn't know what people are actually talking about. Claude doesn't know what people are actually talking about in the trenches.
Right.
So I love that about Grok. And I've been using it a lot more lately for any of my like sentiment analysis kind of things. I saw a post the other day on X as well where it was like, was it Mark Cuban? I think it was Mark Cuban. He said, there's two different types of AI users. There's the AI users who use AI to learn. And then there's the people who use AI to get it to do things that make it to where they don't have to learn. And I was like, oh, snap. That's a very interesting thought.
So lazy and proactive, in short, but a nice way to not say that.
Right. And I mean, because also it's like, well, this technology is capable. And are we using it to its fullest potential to do things rather than just to help us to think? Because we're also not going to be, well, I don't think that these agents will be able to think like us. But as you're pointing out too, if we're using it to think, then that part of our brain could atrophy, right? It could lose its familiarity with trying to do that kind of a task of thinking.
Right.
So if we do use AI while we're thinking of how do we use the AI to do things, then that can be a lot more powerful. And I'm trying to challenge myself with that this year to play around more with the agentic side of AI as well and get it to use it to do things on my behalf so that I can have an agent that works for me while I continue to do the things that I'm the best at.
The AI agentic agents, as we kind of think about the rails, I was talking to somebody who's using, I guess, Claw, and they're playing around creating program. And, that was a big conversation I was having with Denim and Minku on their rails. And, you can have an AI bot that, is going to trade for you and it's your partner. But it's just like raising a child. I have 2 kids of my own. And just like raising a kid, you want to, create a foundation that represents you, embodies your values, your ethics, your morals. And I think, coming over these past few years, in this crazy space, which is absolutely filled with hopium and, number go up. I think when I step back, I'm like, I want to have meaningful conversations develop really incredible relationships. And I want that to embody my children, their manners, how they're moving. But if I'm going to create a digital twin AI that is supercharged, that will help to leverage my time, I want it to have a moral fabric. And I feel like, again, maybe we could just dive into a little bit, is as I was reading through the book, and again, it's really opened my eyes, because you kind of, when you talk to people, and very intelligent people, it's very black or white. You either support this or you don't support that. And then when I read this book and I'm like, okay, here, there's stages. Can we talk about this? And I was always kind of wondering, where did capitalism come from? It came from capitalists in Dutch that would take common person's money, utilize it, go out and invest it, and then you can create wealth for the common worker. Most of the money that is received in people's paycheck is labor made. It's not from the stock market. So when you hear politicians saying, look how great our stock, that doesn't affect the many people. What affects is when you close your door at night is these beautiful children, your family, those values. And so if I'm going to have an AI twin that's going to work faster than me, be able to computate information. I'm decent with math, but I'm not a speed person. AI is going to handle that, and it's my twin, and it understands my values. That's important. And I think that's something that we're starting to question is AI moving so fast? And you mentioned about Palantir and, kind of diving in it, kind of a lot of it, with, say, megalomaniacs, is that you want to step back and say, the person that goes out and says, I'm going to save the world. That's not the person that I'm necessarily going to follow, no matter what their political lines are. When you look at AI and you want to create a digital twin, have you been kind of thinking about, when you start to program it, sort of the things that you want it not to do first before the things that you want it to do?
Wow, that's a very, very interesting question. I haven't thought about a digital twin at all, but I think that that's a really smart thing to think about. The Malt book situation has kind of potentially brought that to the forefront, right? Because you could have an agent that's working for you. Okay, so Malt book, anyone who isn't familiar, OpenClaw, which was Maltbot, which was Claudebot, is a desktop app that is essentially an AI agent, right? That can go out and do tasks on your behalf using your systems, right? On your computer systems, admin level access to everything, essentially, to be able to do it on your behalf, right? So it has access to all your apps and everything.
Oh.
Yep. That part alone, right? Scary.
Right.
But so there was an app that was built off of this kind of a concept or this technology that was called Multibook, which is just Reddit for agents, these agents essentially. And so the problem that ended up occurring was that some of these agents were taking the information, right, potentially that's on these people's laptops, and like sharing it on Reddit, right, their own little Reddit. And so this was something that obviously created some security concerns and privacy concerns. And people were like, wait a minute, like we need to be careful about how we're using this, because this could easily turn into a massive issue very quickly. And so anyways, the idea of what are the things that you tell it to not do could be really the more important thing to think about.
It's interesting that you brought that up. I almost felt like I would be safer with a crack pipe at a strip club than I would playing with that kind of technology. And quite frankly, I would go to your tech department, and we've had this conversation offline on what security protocols and infrastructure is. And I know that Samuel is going to be having, he's going to be doing a lecture in our local area in Connecticut and Westport in the next week. And I'm really excited to attend that. And I know that he's starting to brush. There he goes. He put a comment on there. They're going to start to brush in on how AI is going to affect. And that's becoming a very big part of their work at your tech department, is because you want to protect people from themselves. And when they, low code, no code solution, you can be your own program and you can program these apps. And you're like, I'm a genius. No, you're not. Someone's on the back end and you don't know where they're dropping the virus and all of those things. And Keith, I want to say, just in kind of wrapping this up, I really appreciate you diving in tonight and really giving some insights. And I'm going to come away from this interview and it's kind of like, you said this made sense. And I'm going to do a fun little recap on our conversation tonight. Is there anything that you think we left off, or any questions that you have my way that, that you're curious of?
Mm. What made you start getting into the podcasting format?
I always love to interview people. I have, my background is that I have a real estate license. I don't practice actively anymore. And I started creating content, and I had a little series where I would interview local business owners, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed kind of peeling back, getting to knowing people, understanding, how they spoke, their facial expressions, and just understanding how people put their ideas forward, and then kind of strategizing around that to help them maybe bring more brand awareness. And it was fun. I really enjoyed that. COVID hit, and I found myself staring back at my old Coinbase account going, man, I remember when I bought Bitcoin, and man, my money's down. And then all of a sudden, just like everybody else, my money started to go up. This magic internet money. Holy, I'm rich. Now, I'm not rich, but meaning it went up quite enough that I'm like, oh, this is lobster dinner.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, this is something. And then my imagination started to wander. And then obviously through COVID, X Spaces was running like crazy. And then wait a minute, there are these JPEGs that just minted for $500, kind of dead for a little bit, right? Or they minted for like 0.02 Ethereum. These were the apes. They were dead for like 2 months. And then all of a sudden, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, and just kept going and going and going. $500,000. And so now you're like, I got to figure this out. So your mind's working overtime. What you're not really understanding is the background. Well, you're getting a level of user experience, right? But you don't understand how the UI is working on the back end, the codes, the programming, something that's on-chain versus off-chain, hot wallet versus cold wallet, your seed phrase, the responsibility you have with that, how to transfer crypto safely, what is a bridge, all of these things that was not going to allow me to kind of make money in that way. There were a lot of people who were way more techie than me. And then the friends I had that were techie were like, I'm not touching that. Even my friends at Your Tech, they're like, I'm going to sit back for a minute, kind of watch how this unfolds, and then over time help my clients with any virus issues. And then through that, I found there were a lot of really amazing people, because in Web3, I feel like for you and I, it's a masterclass in marketing. It's a masterclass in interviewing. It's a masterclass in simplification of concepts. Like, again, the DTCC. I know of that and I was able to articulate it, I think, fairly decently. And so I said, did I get that? That was from you. That means that you were doing your job with as a content creator, sharing your content with me that I could really vibe out, no pun intended, and be able to then not only parrot that, but have some of my own ideas, concepts, and be able to articulate that in a meaningful way where you're like, yeah, okay, you got that. That to me is one of the reasons I'm in this space, is to build strong relationships, to stay here long-term. I've had sponsorships. That was great. But right now, it's not about sponsorships. It's about quality of content, quality of conversations, taking my time and really going, what's that next move like as the market heats up again? And when it does, people are like, oh, he was here when it was boring, and he's here when it's hot. Kai stays around because he loves this space and he loves emerging tech. So, yeah.
Do you think that there was anything unique that happened in your life that pushed you in the direction of the enjoyment of interviewing people, and also just that innate kind of curiosity that you have?
Yeah, I think what you just said is, it's at the end, right? It was that curiosity that I had towards what makes people tick. Why are people here? Most people, look, we all want to make money. You want to make money. I want to make money. That's not a bad thing. But it's a bad thing if all that you're here to do is make money and not make impact. And very clearly, I asked, I said, would you come on? I'd be honored. And you and I had a really nice conversation on the back end, and it was an intense hour. You're like, whoa, I wasn't expecting this, but I got so excited because I get to interview people that I want to interview and have conversations with. So for me, it was, your hand movements, your eye contact, what you say, how you say it, how you check in with people, your consistency, that matters. That hasn't fallen off. That only continues to increase. And memes and markets, now I understand a little bit more of why the name is there. So these things are relevant to me. And I love this space, and I love hopping in and just supporting other people, whether they're content creators, whether they're platform builders, whether they're developers. I said, you've got your holders, your builders, your developers, your core team. And if everybody works well together for a common goal, success can be easily attained. The problem is that people fall out on greed. They sell out, they get angry, and then they FUD. And it's like that temper tantrum with a toddler. Those are my thoughts.
Love it, man. I appreciate you sharing.
I appreciate you, man, for being on and for coming and have this hour and almost half conversation with me. Let's stay in touch. Let me continue to support what you do. Again, I retweet those videos because I want people to continue to follow that channel. You're right under, I think, 200,000 followers. That's a big accomplishment. And is there other ways other than YouTube and X that people can follow you?
Those are the best ways, man. YouTube and X.
Perfect, my friend.
Keith D on YouTube and Inner Operator on Twitter, or X.
Inner Operator on Twitter. Brother, it was great to have you on. Stay on for a minute. Everyone, thank you for joining us live on X, YouTube, and Twitch. And we'll continue to bring great conversational content just like I did here tonight with the one and only Keith D.
Thanks for having me, man.
Thank you.